Welcome to True Crime 101 with Murder Friends, the podcast where three friends from three different countries talk murder. My name's Anna, and I'm American.
I'm Alana, and I'm Canadian.
My name's Hannah, and I'm British.
In addition to our longer episodes, True Crime 101 talks you through key true crime cases and theories. So I think Alana may have forgotten where she's from today. It took a moment.
I think we forgot which order we were supposed to go in.
Yeah.
I always panic. It's like being in class and you get called on and you just don't remember your name anymore.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad we're laughing now because I'm here to ruin your day.
Oh, God.
Wow.
Yes. Okay. Obviously, it's spooky season, so I thought it only appropriate to pick a spooky season related sort of topic. So I'm going to get started. In March 1994, a struggling actor and screenwriter named Kevin Williamson became engrossed in a news program about a drifter who terrorized the town of Gainesville, Florida, with the murders of 5 college students over 3 days in August 1990. So, finding himself spooked by the news, he sat down and wrote the screenplay that would be the movie. Do you have any guesses? 90s.
No.
One of the top 90s slasher films. Okay.
Is it Scream?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just got a little excited there about that. Okay. So today I'm going to tell you about that story that inspired the movie Scream, and it's about serial killer Danny Rolling, also known as the Gainesville Ripper. Now, before I started, forgot how heinous these crimes actually were. So I have actually opted not to get in graphic detail about what he necessarily did because I don't think we need to do that. And yeah, it's pretty awful. So my sources today, of course, they include Wikipedia and articles from biography.com and Escapist magazine. So I'll start in 1954 when Danny Rolling was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, to a 19-year-old mother named Claudia and a police officer named James, a decorated Korean War veteran who probably suffered some sort of combination of post-traumatic stress disorder and mental illness. Rolling later revealed that his childhood was pretty horrific and traumatic, and that he and his brother and his mother, they all suffered abuse from his father. And his father always would say to him that, he was not a wanted child. His mother continued to try to leave him, but would always go back. So basically, we're sort of laying the groundwork for a serial killer here. Rolling turned to art and music for solace when he was younger. His Christmas gift of guitar at age 15 is one of his only happy memories from his adolescence. He recalled these early years as a time when he developed multiple personalities as a defense from the nightmarish reality around him. He did try committing suicide, to bring an escape, but he failed. So Rolling joined the Air Force when he grew up, but was discharged in 1972 after getting busted for drug possession. Rolling then went to live with his grandfather, and for a time he found some stability because he started to go to church with his grandfather. He then later got married and had a daughter, but eventually he drove them away because he started to abuse them the same way his father had abused him. Rolling took a turn for the worse after the divorce. He raped a woman who resembled his ex-wife and embarked on several armed robberies through the South, leading to his incarceration in Jackson, Georgia in 1979. In the 80s, brought more of the same for Rolling. He was in and out of prison in Alabama and Mississippi for armed robberies. His time in between stints in jail were spent traveling around the country, stealing and raping women. Back in Shreveport in November 1989, he had come back for a visit. Rolling had been fired from his job at a restaurant. So that same night, he broke into a home to murder 24-year-old Julie Grisham, also her 8-year-old nephew, Sean, and her 55-year-old father, Tom. These were his first murders, but they wouldn't find out that he was the one that committed them until much later after he was arrested for the later crimes. The following May, Rolling got into one sort of final argument with his father, and this time he pulled out a gun and shot James in the stomach and the head. His father actually survived, but lost the use of an eye and an ear, Rowling then fled to Kansas because he was obviously wanted at that point, and then to Florida, where he eventually arrived in Gainesville in 1990. So I feel like, just to interlude, there's part of the story where you just feel like all the red flags are there. They're just, nobody's putting them together yet. Nobody's can see this coming and what's going to happen.
It's such a like stereotypical like character arc, you see it on TV and movies and in history through like literally every other serial killer is the same thing that this guy's going through. Crazy.
Exactly. That's what I said about like his childhood. I was just like, oh dear. Yes. So Gainesville, Florida is home to the University of Florida and is it's a college town, and so I've been there quite a few times. A lot of my school friends went on to go to school there, and my little high school ex-boyfriend went there, and so I'd go up and visit, and it's a really, really nice school. It's a very good school, very, like, pretty prestigious university, especially for the area, and it's just nice, and the whole town is all centered around the school, so it's very much a college town. It's just all centered around there. Really nice place to go to uni. So on arrival, he set up a campsite in a wooded area behind the university. So he's truly off the radar. In the early morning of Friday, August 24th, Rowling broke into the apartment shared by 17-year-old university freshmen Sonia Larson and Christina Powell. Finding Powell asleep on the downstairs couch, he stood over her briefly, but did not wake her, instead choosing to explore the upstairs bedroom where Larson was also asleep. Rowling then murdered Larson by stabbing her to death. He then went down. He managed to do that without waking up Powell. He went downstairs. He taped her mouth shut, bound her wrists together, and also raped and murdered her. Rowling posed the bodies in sexually provocative positions, which was part of his MO after all of his murders. He then took a shower before he left. So I feel like that is literally my worst nightmare is just like the sleeping. It's in like so many horror movies and some of the worst movies, like the Golden State Killer, when he comes in when people are sleeping. It's just like,
yeah, it's your safe place.
Yeah, it's horrific.
It's when you're most vulnerable, isn't it? It's horrible.
Yeah.
And then to be ballsy enough to stick around to have a shower afterwards because like you are capable of doing that. I don't know. It's just
It's unreal. So when police arrived to investigate the scene, they were shocked by the savagery of the attack. Again, I've chosen not really go into massive details about it because we don't really need to. One local reporter noted that it was the first time he had not been allowed to directly go in the crime scene and see it, and he expressed concern after witnessing a seasoned officer that he knew rush out of the house and vomit into the bushes. So police knew right away they were dealing with a very depraved person and suspected that it wouldn't be long before he struck again, and they were right. So the following day, August 25th, 1990, a day after Sonia and Christina had been brutally slain, Rowling broke into Krista Hoyt's apartment and he ransacked it for valuables, stealing what he could. He then waited for her to return. When she entered her apartment, even worse, around 11 a.m., Rowling attacked her from behind, trapping her in a chokehold. As with his previous victims, he taped her mouth shut and her wrists before raping and murdering her. One thing I will is he did decapitate her and pose the body. So it's just like, when I'm talking heinous, just like horrible stuff, he really, it's bad.
And to do that like the next day.
Exactly.
Like...
Yeah, it's bad.
Sorry.
No, I know. Sorry. I told you I was here to ruin your day.
She went wrong.
On August 27th, just 2 days after his prior attack, he broke into the apartment of Manny Tabata, and I'm so sorry I'm saying that wrong, Tabiota, there we go, and Tracy Poles. I'm going to call him Manny. He weighed over 200 pounds, so he was a big guy. So he fought back, but Rowling eventually subdued and killed him. Tracy came down to investigate what was the noise that had awoken her, and she finds Rowling killing her roommate. She fled and locked herself in her room, but Danny broke down the door, and with previous victims, he taped her mouth and wrists and raped and murdered her. Another thing, the breaking down of the door. Jesus. So, obviously, there's 5 college students who had been murdered in a matter of 3 days? 4 days. There we go. A deep paranoia fell over Gainesville once the public learned that it wasn't just petite brunettes being attacked, but that a large man had also been killed. It was clear that no one was safe from this monster, and by this point, the string of bizarre murders and it had attracted like a huge media attention. Of course, because that's just like insane. That's like I don't know, would you consider that a spree killer? I know it's a serial killer, but it's like the spree is like in such a short period of time.
You think how much energy it would take to actually commit some of these crimes, and the fact that he's doing so many like back to back is just like the sheer amount of energy and like rage you would have to be able to even do that, because it sounds exhausting.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And you're like living out in a tent in the woods somewhere.
Ugh.
Like that's what you're
Gross.
going back to. So students began taking extra precautions, from like switching up their daily routines to like studying and sleeping together in small groups. Some bought baseball bats and mace and had extra locks installed in their doors and windows. Gun sales went up. Helicopters with searchlights were just going around the city. So overwhelmed by the brutality and nonstop media coverage of the crimes, some of the parents literally just like withdrew their children from the university, which I get. It was at the beginning of the fall semester, so they just transferred to somewhere else, because I can get when especially if the police have like no idea what's happening all of a sudden. So a big investigation ensues, with over 6,500 leads and over 1,500 pieces of evidence. Initially, however, the police had a very few credible leads to go on. They focused on a suspect named Edward Humphrey, who was brought in due to having been evicted from the apartment complex where Miss Pauls and Mr. Tabira lived, as well as he had a history of erratic behavior. So by all accounts, Edward looked like the part of this killer. He kind of fit in with what they thought they might be looking for. His face had been horrifically scarred during a car accident where he'd attempted to run from a moving car. So he really just sort of, I guess the police sort of like looked the part, I suppose. The media wildly and repeatedly showed Edward's face in the media, which you're kind of like, that doesn't really seem to be fair, because he's obviously hadn't been arrested for it. To make matters worse, the murders instantly ended after Edwards was taken into custody. So then that sort of more fueled it. Despite a lack of physical evidence tying him to the crime scene, police were certain they'd had their man. They didn't. It was later determined that Edward was mentally ill, and he, along with another suspect who did not receive the same amount of media attention, were completely exonerated of all the crimes. I guess, but probably by that point his life was ruined, so...
Yeah, I was going to say, what effect would that have on
I
you?
know, it's already
Like,
if you have
going
those...
forward.
Exactly. So around the same time, Rowling had been camping out in the woods with souvenirs from his murders and financing his killing spree with like a string of robberies. So he was kind of like back to his old MO, where he was just robbing and then doing the killers. He did actually, which I left out, he did take some souvenirs from the victims, which I won't even speak about. So he literally had so much evidence that it was him. Detectives didn't know it at first, but later discovered that that there was a tape recorder that Danny had been bringing with him that had several confessions and explanations for his grisly crimes. He also had blood from his victims, the roll of tape he'd used to bind and gag them with, and the screwdrivers he'd used to pry open the door and windows of his victims' residences. So he's literally caught like with everything. With an overwhelming amount of evidence against him, he was charged with several counts of murder in November 1990, and in 1994, just prior to the start of his trial, Rowling decided to plead guilty to all charges, telling the judge, quote, "There are some things that you just can't run from." He bragged that his motive for the killings were to become a superstar like Ted Bundy. Oh, God.
Ew.
I know. God, I hate that guy. Why does he just pop up
Trash.
like... Obviously, he's known because he did murder co-eds at the Chi Omega sorority and at Florida State University. Sorry, my cat is underneath the microphone, rolling around on his back. I didn't realize he was there. Sorry. Lost my place. So if he expected to receive any leniency for the admission of his terrible crimes, he was definitely disappointed, because he was sentenced to the death penalty on each case of murder, or each count of murder he committed So on October 25th, 2006, after he'd exhausted his final appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, the serial killer and rapist Daniel Rolling was executed by lethal injection at the Florida State Prison. In a written statement given to detectives prior to his execution, Rolling confessed to the murders of the Grisham family in Shreveport. So those were the 3 murders I mentioned at the start. Until his final moments, Rolling showed no remorse whatsoever for his actions and refused to make any verbal statements or even offer an apology for his crimes to the relatives of his victims, many of whom showed up to witness his death. He refused to make eye contact during his execution, humming gently to himself as he was strapped in and the drugs were administered. Across the road from the prison, dozens of onlookers gathered in groups waiting for the word that he had passed, and it was actually one of the biggest gatherings for an execution Florida had since Ted Bundy, unfortunately, which is just what he wanted, wasn't it?
I like how every time you say Ted Bundy, we both go,
like you physically have to make a noise, like
No, thank you.
At 6:13 p.m., he was officially pronounced dead. And that is the story of the monster that is Danny Rolling.
I didn't know that Scream was based on a real
Yes.
No, me
a
neither.
real story.
Yeah. So,
Because you watch it, because Scream is like, it's pretty trashy, like, but it's
Yeah.
a classic.
oh yeah.
So I remember watching it and thinking, oh, like, this is so far-fetched, this is overblown, blah, blah, blah. But to now realise that that was based on a true story, I feel different.
Well, I loved Scream. Scream was like literally for my target age group. I was like I was at the like prime age of the audience, like that would like it because it was like high school. Yeah, so it was like, you know, that ghost face.
Sleepover.
Yeah, sleepover. We watch it. Do you remember?
Those masks.
Yeah, and it was definitely like one of the faves, and it had like Drew
Do you
Barrymore.
guys remember when it came out?
Yeah,
I was just Googling it.
I do, yeah.
yeah, 1990. I had it.
Wow, there's 5 Screams?
There are 5
Oh, there's
Screams.
gonna be a 5th Scream.
What, they're making a 5th one?
Sorry.
No,
They're making a 5th one. Sorry. That's yeah, first Scream came out in 96.
There we go.
Yeah, I remember I was a baby.
I was gonna say you were.
I was a baby in 96, but I do remember I have an older sister and she must have had it or somebody had it in the house and I remember watching it and I should not have.
You're like, I'm
watched
too
it.
young to watch this.
It's like one of those things that kind of stick with you. But I remember, at least in Canada, because Halloween's such a big thing, like in North America, the Scream costume was so big for honestly 10, 15 years. There's always like multiple kids dressed up in the Scream costume. Or if you had an extra little bit of money, you could buy the Scream costume that had the fake blood.
Oh, God.
So like you had like a pump inside that you would squeeze and like fake blood would come out over on the mask. So now knowing that that was like loosely based on a real person kind of makes you feel a little bit sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a huge Halloween thing when I was growing up.
Yeah, it was massive. Obviously in America too. I mean, I was probably 96, so I don't know. I was still a bit young. I probably didn't watch it when it first came out. It was probably a few years after, because I still would have been a little bit young in 96. Well, not really. I don't know. To be watching it. But it was just, you're right. I remember you can still buy those ghost face masks.
Oh, yeah.
Like they come out
I
every
think I was
Halloween.
I think I was like 12 or 13 when it came out.
Yeah.
Which is far too young to watch the film, but of course, when it came out on video.
Yeah. Yes, the videos.
Yeah,
yeah.
when it came out on video, yeah.
All over that.
But to think that they're making another Scream, a 5th Scream.
I feel like we should all watch it just because when it comes out.
Oh, we should have movie night and watch the 5th Scream.
Watch the 5th Scream. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. Do you guys remember the movie? I Know What You Did Last Summer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another one of the cult classics.
Oh, with like Final Destination. And
Oh yeah,
that kind
Final
of-
Destination.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know
Final
what?
was the other
Destination
one?
fucked me up.
That scene with the logs still haunts me. Tell me you don't think of that every time on the freeway you see like a log truck. You're like,
Yeah,
oh hell no,
absolutely.
no, not today,
100%.
Buster.
I'm always like, change lanes. Just change lanes.
Just
I don't
change
want to be behind it.
What about you guys? Any other ones that you can remember from when you were younger that stuck with you?
I think probably not when I was like young, but like things like Jeepers Creepers. There was like a whole spate of those like naff horror films
Oh, yes.
in like the late 90s, early noughties. And they were just trash, but they were just entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, I don't know if this is like a favorite Halloween family story where my parents and I watched Amityville Horror, one of them, there's many. And again, I was too young, but watched it with my parents anyway. It was a Friday night. And I remember I was upstairs brushing my teeth to go to bed. And the story obviously is based on the father who kills his family with an axe. And my dad thought it would be real funny and real character building to...
Oh, no.
He got the axe out of our garage, and as I was brushing my teeth, he was, like, dragging it up the stairs and, like, groaning. And honestly,
oh my God.
It's so perfectly funny now, but I swear to God, in that moment, I could have pissed myself.
I would have. Oh my God, it's terrifying.
Dad,
He's dragging the axe up the stairs. It was so fun. But yeah, that, a happy Halloween memory.
We scared the absolute shit out of you.
Oh, man.
I'm not gonna lie. You know what scared me? I'm not really into, like, horror movies or, like, ghosty stuff. But I watched The Ring once. I'm scared. I know it's not real, but I don't care.
The Ring is another good family story that I watched with my parents.
What is up with your
and then Dad called the home, like, so the phone would ring, right? Because when you watch the video, the phone rings and it's like, you've got 7 days. So I remember him calling the house, like, as we were getting ready for bed. He's like, oh, it's because we watched the video. Like,
I love his sense of humor, though.
This is called childhood trauma, Dad. But the Ring is genuine. I actually watched that fairly recently, and I think it, like, holds up pretty well. It's a creeper.
It is so creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, have you seen there's a Japanese version of it?
That was the original,
really
wasn't it?
The original. And I think there's a book as well. And the book's pretty spooky.
Wow.
Would recommend.
Well, I think that's all we have for today. Check out our website, murderfriends.com. You can email us with any ideas, any articles, any weird crimes, any good true crime 101s, murderfriendspod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at murderfriendspd and Instagram at murderfriendspod. And we will see you next time. Bye.